All right, so the viewpoints I'm about to express here are going to be very, very controversial in nature. And many of you are likely not going to agree with it, and I'm totally okay with this. But if you believe that I am wrong, I want you guys to point out in the comment section as to why that is, okay? I have enough humility to accept that I may be wrong about something. That's how we learn. I make my statements known, you critique it, and hopefully it's beneficial for everybody. And also, if you're a special snowflake NPC that gets triggered easily, I don't recommend you watch this. Turn back before it's too late. Frankly, I normally wouldn't bother with a topic like this, but because I'm in the mood to rant, and because people want more rants, and because I am sick and tired of seeing this mentality not just on YouTube, but in person and all around me in various communities, I am just going to go ahead and do it. Now, I and many others were raised to believe that the white man has basically taken or acquired everything that they know or built from someone else. And frankly, I'm not here to debate whether that is or isn't true, because ultimately that does not matter. Now, if you were to ask somebody, what exactly did the white man steal? Now, you're probably going to get responses along the lines of these things, like this country, rock music, pop music, many ancient artifacts from other civilizations, slang, cultures, and inventions, and so on. As you can tell, there's a lot of context missing with a lot of those things in that list, so you could probably fill in the blanks yourself. But before we go on, I think it's important that we define our terms, and those terms meaning the definition of the word stolen. So let's start off with the definition of the word stolen as per the dictionary. So it means to take another person's property without permission or legal right and without intending to return it. Dishonestly pass off another person's ideas as one's own. All right, so the left likes to add something a little extra to the definition of the word stolen, and it's something we commonly hear as cultural appropriation. Now, I don't see a set dictionary definition for this, so Wikipedia was the closest thing I could find. I know Wikipedia is cancer, but I'm still going to read this anyway because it's basically how they think. And it goes, a cultural appropriation, at times also phrased cultural misappropriation, is the adoption of elements of one's culture by members of another's culture. This culture can be controversial when members of a dominant culture appropriate from a quote-unquote disadvantaged minority culture. So, tell you what, I'm going to let you define for yourself whether you believe cultural appropriation is theft or not. But, for the sake of arguing, let's just go ahead and say it is, okay? Alright, so given those definitions, would you say that the white race has stolen from other cultures? My answer is yes, they have. But once again, it doesn't matter. And additionally, I don't care, because every culture does it. That's right, every single culture that you can think of has culturally appropriated, borrowed, taken, stolen, whatever you want to call it, something from another culture and made it their own as well as improved on it. And I will expand on this in just a moment. Now, if you're one that's bothered by the concept of cultural appropriation or cultural theft, whatever you might want to call it, I have a solution for you, and it will benefit you in the long run, okay? Now, let me get into the conversation that actually sparked the topic of this video. So, this particular user responded to my comment saying, and I quote, "Name one thing any culture or race took from white culture, and WTF is white culture all throughout history. They learned and stole from other cultures and races." And you'll note that his responses are devoid of any sort of punctuation whatsoever. Well, not that it really matters, it just makes it harder to read that statement coherently out loud. So I've given him a long list of things that people stole from white culture, given the definitions that we set earlier in this video. Now, I'll share some examples of that a bit later on, but the point I was trying to make overall is that people in various countries, be it the second world, the third world, or whatever, will take bits and pieces of Western culture to not only make it their own, but to refine it to their own benefit. But why do they do this? Because it is perceived to be superior to their own, or what they have at the moment. So let's say your culture was lacking something in one area for in one way or another, and you saw another culture that managed to solve that issue for the benefit of everybody and not just yourself. You'd be a fool to say, no, I'm not going to appropriate that culture because if I do, that's stealing. But getting back to that fruitless conversation. Now, his next statement was, and I quote, "You're," spelled Y-O-U-R, "wrong, and no history like you think you do," end quote. Yes, he left out the word don't. So, my response is this. First, I correct him on his grammar. And second, I ask any counter-arguments to the points I just made. His response, "I have one for everything you said. I'm just not going to go back and forth with somebody who clearly believes he's right already." My response, who doesn't respond to a comment believing they are quote-unquote right already? I want to hear what you have to say. That is the point of debate/discussion. After that, crickets. Not a single response. And he was responding very quickly and frequently before then. And that's because the NPC ran out of programmed responses. Now, to be frank, you guys know me. I am open to being wrong. And I even tell you this frequently, that if I am wrong, I want you or someone else to correct me. Now, I gave him the opportunity to do so, and he didn't take it. So when you end an argument with, "I'm right and you're wrong," or in this case, "I know the answer, but I just refuse to tell you," you know what that is? That's what we call moral cowardice. Anybody remember that donkey from Family Guy?
Nope. Sorry. Kevin Bacon wasn't in Footloose.
What? Of course he was.
No, he wasn't. You lose.
Of course he was. He was the star.
Nope, you're wrong. Look it up.
I don't have to look it up. It's common knowledge.
Nope.
He was on the cover of People magazine when the movie everyone knows Kevin Bacon was a star of Footloose. It was a huge movie. He was the lead.
So let's move on here. Now, as I was saying before, cultural appropriation is something that goes on all around the world, from the first to the third world. Now, if you can think of one culture that has never culturally appropriated anything, you know what they are? They live in a state of extreme stagnation, extreme isolation, and or both. There's only one place I can think of in the entire world off the top of my head that fits that description, or at least somewhat, and that is Sentinel Island. If you don't know what that is, go ahead and look it up. And no, it's not a reference to Genosha. Now, let me give you some examples here. You see, living in the first world or even the third world, you tend to enjoy luxuries such as cars, business suits, housing styles, cuisine, etc., etc. Now, the business suit that we wear today, that was invented in 17th century Europe somewhere. Now, do you think that in third world countries where they wear these types of suits that we do in the West, do you think that they just somehow managed to come up with the design plans on their own? No, they acquired that from our culture. Have you ever eaten at the Olive Garden? Oh no, you're culturally appropriating Italian cuisine. Okay, so let's focus on some simpler things. There's languages, there's alphabets, and so on that other countries adopt from Latin origins. Like the Vietnamese, for example. They originally borrowed their language from Chinese, and now they're using more Latin-based symbols for their alphabet. There's countries in Africa that now speak French and English. You have countries that speak other languages that originate from Europe. And everybody wants to speak English too, because English is like the national standard language now. That is cultural appropriation, isn't it? So just think about this. How many countries model their government, their education system, and language off of Western culture? Many of them. Do you know what else they model after the West? Their forms of government. One example is Western-style democracy. There have been so many countries that want the Western-style democracy. Either they will try to implement it into their own countries, or they will come to the USA so they can enjoy our illusion of freedom. Oh, and what's another common form of government that other countries in the third world have tried to adopt? That's right, communism. I mean, every continent from Africa to Asia, in some form or another, has tried to implement some form of communism/socialism, ultimately with no long-term success, I might add. So after Zimbabwe culturally appropriated communism and socialist ideology to implement into their own government, what did they do? They killed off their political dissidents, they killed off the white farmers, and they ended up starving to death, as well as experienced a massive currency collapse. Now, I could go on about education as well as industry, such as China, which 1 out of 5 businesses in the US have claimed that their intellectual property was stolen by China, and Japan. So much of the technology industry over there has been taken, improved upon, and increased in efficiency, all because they culturally appropriated the technology that the West originally created, which you reap the benefits of, I might add. Now, I want you to consider these two things here. Survival of the fittest, Darwinian evolution, aka natural selection. It's the strongest, smartest, and most notably the most adaptable organisms that survive, not the ones who claim oppression the loudest. Your ability to appropriate cultures is part of your ability to adapt. Now, there's various examples of where if you fail to appropriate certain cultures, it limits and reduces your chances of survival. Now, let's say we wage war against an alien race, one that was just hell-bent on destroying humanity. Let's say in Independence Day, for example. Now, let's say we won that war, and all the aliens were killed off because we knew we had to kill them down to the last one in order for the human race to survive. Now, what is the first thing that we do after our victory besides begin to rebuild? We're going to acquire as much of their technology, knowledge, and culture as possible to our benefit. And whether you like it or not, want it or not, believe it or not, every culture has done this to their neighboring countries and tribes. Native Americans, the Mayans, the Incans, the Aztecs, the ancient Egyptians, the Romans, the Vikings. Every culture has invaded another culture of some sort. They've acquired the technology, the knowledge, and so forth, and even acquired the women, and bred with them, and created a more genetically diverse race. Now, you might be thinking, well, how would you like it if someone came over and took over your civilization, destroyed your entire race, and raped your women to create their new breed? So instead of just immediately jumping up and saying, well, no, I prefer to judge the value of a society based on this. I like to call it the net benefit versus the net loss of cultural appropriation. So let's look at the scenario of the Spanish taking over the Mayan civilization. Now, was it a pleasant thing? Was it pretty? No, it wasn't. It was actually a pretty gruesome thing. There was a lot of greed involved, and a lot of people were killed. A lot of their culture was destroyed. A lot of their finest art was melted down into gold, silver, and copper bars, to be sold and bartered. Yeah, it was a total loss, almost, that is. Now let's compare the Mayan civilization then and the modern-day South America now. Back then, they were sacrificing each other to gods and various other deities for various reasons. Now, would you want something like that to continue? Would you want them to continue some pagan religion where they're just sacrificing each other left and right, all because they lost some sort of sports game? Would you rather your virgin firstborn daughter be sacrificed to a volcano god, or would you rather the local religion be Roman Catholicism? Now, I can't speak for you, and I'm assuming most of you guys are atheist or agnostic, but frankly, I would still prefer the latter. Now, when the Spaniards came in, their way of life began to increase, and their standard of living is so much better now than it was back then, and arguably wouldn't have been better if they had continued down that path. Now, am I excusing the Spanish conquistadors? Absolutely not. But the thing is that it's happened. It's already been done, and there's nothing we can do to undo it. So the best thing you can do is just look at the result and decide which one you'd rather have. So a country with a cultural appropriation net loss, for example, would be Zimbabwe, because they chose socialism/communism as their form of government. They killed off all their political dissidents, they killed off their white farmers, and they began to starve because they didn't have anyone to grow their food. And they suffered a massive currency collapse. Socialism is a terrible form of government. It does not work. And if that culture that you're appropriating is objectively inferior and is going to make your outcome worse, then it would be wise not to adopt it. So if you're going to appropriate my culture and take it over to make it superior to what it is, then by all means, go ahead. Now, if you're still with me up to the 16-minute mark, then I'm hoping that you understand where I'm coming from when it comes to this cultural appropriation stuff, and why it's not nearly as bad as the left claims it to be. And if you're one of those that is bothered by all the knowledge, technology, and culture that the white man has allegedly stole, then I want you to consider this. All of that knowledge, it's not hidden from you. You still have access to it. If you have access to the library and the internet, you have access to all the information that has been acquired and compiled throughout the years through Western culture. So let's say the white man stole rock and roll music. Why don't you take the knowledge that is available to you and become a better rock and roll artist? Why don't you try starting a business? All the information on how to do that, as well as operate that business, and even perform the unique business operations that your company would provide in terms of services and products. It's all out there. You don't have to go to college. You can just pick up a book and start learning. That's precisely what I did. I picked up a book, I searched online, and I am doing much better than most of my peers when I was in school. Now, I am serious. All of that knowledge is yours. It is yours for the taking, and nobody can stop you from getting it. And I knew that if I didn't do so myself, I would be leaving money on the table, working a dead-end job, complaining to myself saying I could have been a contender. So instead of complaining that the white man has got me down, what I did was I took initiative, took advantage of all the information and the technology that this white man had allegedly stole, and started using it for my own benefit. I now have an income that is greater than the average median household income. I'm now between the middle and upper class of the middle class income bracket. Plus my income and industry prospects are now going up. And I didn't sit around blaming the white man for everything. I do not care if they have stolen your slang. I do not care if they have stolen your genre of music, especially one that you refuse to reclaim for your own, like rock and roll music. Now, back before the black community was destroyed by welfare, feminism, and Planned Parenthood, what did black people do? They actually fought to rise above the oppression. And statistically speaking, black people were doing better under Jim Crow, which is very, very sad. Black Wall Street and the variations thereof are a prime example, something they don't teach you in school. And by the way, in case you're new to this channel, I am black. And if you're going to call me the usual Uncle Tom, well, you might as well just get used to it, because I'm Uncle Ruckus. So in closing, in the age of information, you only choose to be ignorant. You choose not to pick up a book. You choose not to search the net for things that will make you successful. You're not going to find that knowledge watching BET and reruns of 106 in Park all day, drinking 40 ounces and eating bags of pork rinds. So has the white man really got you down? Or has the white guilt you project onto those you perceive to be above you have you down instead? Think about that and take all the time you need.